Yeah, this is long. I'd say I'm sorry, but that would be a lie. Shadow Man is an open-world horror game released in 1999 by Acclaim Entertainment. It was available on multiple consoles, including the Nintendo 64, PlayStation, and Sega Dreamcast. It was never considered one of the best games on any of these, but it developed a cult following online. Unfortunately for fans, things went downhill after that initial release. Shadow Man got a divisive sequel on the PlayStation 2 3 years later, and in 2004, Acclaim Entertainment shut down, dashing any hope of more Shadow Man content. This changed in 2020, when Night Dive Studios announced they acquired the rights to the IP and were developing a remaster that would serve as the definitive version of the game. 1 year later, it was released on PC and modern consoles for $20. To make one thing clear on my end, I didn't play this game growing up. I was born in 2002, and my first console was the Wii. I picked up the remaster during the 2024 Steam Summer Sale, and this is my first time playing it. The nearest pair of rose-tinted goggles are 50 miles out, and I'm way too lazy to make that drive, so I'll be judging the remaster purely on its own merits. Also, I'm gonna spoil the story. If you're new here, that's just kind of what I do, sorry to say. However, I will talk about the gameplay basics before diving deep into the plot, and I'll be sure to tell you all when I'm getting into major spoilers. With all that out of the way, let's head into the underworld. Shadow Man opens in the sewers of England in the year 1888. The infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper writes in his diary. He laments how, despite his intense passion for murder and mutilation, he has not been able to find a human soul anywhere in his victims' bodies. He solemnly contemplates performing these same brutal acts upon himself, but before he can, a strange man appears with an offer Jack can't refuse.
Stay your hand, Jack, and listen to what I have to say.
How did you find this place? Who are you?
My name is Legion, for we are many. The immortal power that you seek does exist. It does indeed lie within the soul, but only within certain ones, certain dark souls.
My God, what are you that you can produce such things from thin air?
Merely an explorer, much like yourself.
What is it that you want from me?
You are an architect by trade, are you not?
I am.
Then I would have you build a cathedral to pain. A place where you and I and others like us may join together. A place of asylum for all of the unique and misunderstood individuals that will follow you as the time of Armageddon approaches. And at the heart of asylum, we shall construct a great dark engine powered by souls of equal hue. And we shall harness their power to create an immortal army to punish and cleanse this pathetic world.
And where might I build this cathedral of yours?
Across the veil, in the darkness, amongst the restless spirits of those who have passed beyond, in the place known as Deadside.
Then, if I am to join you, I must die.
It is prophecy. We cannot fail, for we are many.
For we are many.
Amen to that.
We fast forward 100 years into the future, to an apartment in the Louisiana bayou, where we meet our protagonist, Michael Leroy, and his partner of sorts, Nettie. Michael is part of a lineage of voodoo warriors who travel between the realms of the living and the dead, known as Liveside and Deadside. Much of their backstory isn't told in the game itself, so I'll read from the instruction manual for a bit. Michael Lewa entered college to study English literature, but he developed an alcohol and gambling addiction, dropped out, and became a taxi driver instead. One day, a passenger of his was killed in a drive-by shooting involving a local gang, leaving their suitcase with $20,000 in Michael's possession. The gang was able to track Mike down, threatening him if he didn't give back the money. However, Mike couldn't do this because he took the money and used it to pay for life-saving surgery for his younger brother Luke and expensive gifts for his family. Desperate to avoid a gruesome death, Michael sought out a Bakor for magical protection. It worked, but in the worst way possible. When the gang finally tracked him down, they shot up Michael's car, killing his parents and his brother. Michael lived due to the protection of the Bakor, but when he recovered, he fell under the Bakor's control. As it turns out, this guy had his own connections to the criminal underworld, and Michael had just become his mind-controlled slave. One night, Nettie stormed into the Bakor's bar and sewed an object called the Mask of Shadows into Mike's chest, transforming him into the Shadow Man, an immortal zombie warrior. However, his powers only work when he's in Deadside or when it's nighttime in Liveside. Becoming the Shadow Man didn't give Michael the independence he was looking for either. It merely transferred ownership of him from the Bakor to Nettie. Nettie is the creator of the Mask of Shadows, which enables the wearer to tap into the power of the gods and travel freely between Liveside and Deadside. Despite looking like a 20-something-year-old woman, Nettie is actually hundreds of years old. In order to maintain a youthful appearance, she has to, get busy with the bearer of the mask, which explains why these two were sharing a bed. Anyway, back to the game. Tonight, Nettie is tormented in her dreams by the faces of various men, including Legion. Michael doesn't think this is a big deal, but for Nettie, it's confirmation of an ancient dark prophecy, and one that only Michael can stop due to his unique powers as the bearer of the Mask of Shadows.
Ends common, Shadow Man. An ancient prophecy tells of the return of a great evil to Deadside. A terrible force gathering dark souls to its darker heart and using their power to cross over into this world and bring about apocalypse.
I must stop this evil from bringing about the end of all things.
Only you can do it, Shadow Man. You are the walker between the worlds. I can't go Deadside, and Jaunty's next to useless in both worlds. You are the only one who can do anything about this.
As it ever was.
While Michael by this point has accomplished many great things as the Shadow Man, Nettie warns him that this particular evil is on a whole new level compared to his previous scuffles. This evil, known as Legion, is so powerful that even the old gods couldn't destroy it, hence why the prophecy says he would return. Nettie tells Mike to take a file on the nightstand and meet her at a church in the Louisiana Bayou tomorrow. Nettie and Mike have a pretty complicated relationship throughout the game. On one hand, the two of them clearly trust each other to some extent. Michael takes Nettie's advice seriously, and Nettie is confident that Michael will complete any task she assigns to him. However, other cutscenes show that Mike strongly resents being in this position. The only reason he doesn't attempt to fight back is because when he was able to make his decisions, they were poor ones. So as far as he's concerned, for now, it's best to let Nettie make all the calls in his life.
I got nothing left anyways. It's my fault Luke's dead, and Mom and Pop too. I deserve everything I get. Every bad thing that comes my way.
So he does what he's told and arrives at the church, where their conversation from last night continues.
Nettie?
Hey there, Mike. Glad you could make it.
How could I refuse your offer? How could I ever refuse you, Agneta?
You can't. I'm simply irresistible. I hope you read the file I gave you, and read it real well. Between the lines, you'll find the signs.
Spoiler alert, you literally never have to read the case file. I'll go over it later anyway, but just know that there's very little required reading. All I'll say for now is that it provides the backstories for the Five, a group of serial killers who have aligned themselves with Legion. Nettie explains that the Dark Souls are located in Govai, strong containers that only the Shadow Man can open. Michael's goal is to absorb as many Dark Souls as possible before Legion and his undead army get their grubby hands on them. Nettie gives Michael two things. The first is a special handgun that I'll talk more about later. As for the other object, it's Luke's old teddy bear. It serves as a way to fast travel around the map. Considering how long it can take to get from place to place on foot, this is a godsend. Unfortunately, you can't quite warp wherever you want. You'll need to find designated points in each area of the game before you can teleport there. You'll know that you found the correct point whenever you get oh so rudely jump scared by it. Now, as for why a mere teddy bear is able to do this...
Jesus, Luke. He's alive. Alive and in pain. I gotta help him.
He's dead, Mike. You know that.
I know, but I saw.
It's understandable that you still have strong feelings for your brother. That's why the bear works for you, connecting you to Deadside.
Nettie tells Mike to get his ass over to Deadside to meet Jaunty, her assistant. Although Michael doesn't have to do that if the player really doesn't want him to. You're free to explore the bayou to your heart's content. Unfortunately, there's not much to discover at the moment other than more dogs and a lake full of crocodiles, which will make short work of Mike if you're not careful. And thus, Michael Leroy travels to Deadside.
I am the Lord of Deadside, Shadowborn at the confluence of worlds to walk between. Lifeside is without the meaning that my partly living possesses here in Deadside, where the darkness is manifest at the edges of reason. As a god, I step forth upon the writhing, suppurating surface of the Deadside Serpent. What sleep is here? What dreams there are in the unctuous coilings of the snake's mortal shuffling. Weapon in my hand, the arcing death blow at the end of all things. The horror, I embrace it.
This particular area is called the Wasteland, where Deadsiders roam all over the place and attempt to suck out your life force whenever you get too close. Even more dangerous than them are the zombies. Fast creatures who will jump from out of view and rip you apart. And if you think you're far enough away from them, think again, since they have a projectile attack and don't shy away from using it. You'll know when one of them has found you when you hear their scream. Eventually, Michael finds Jaunty. According to the manual, Jaunty was once a normal guy living in Ireland until he was kidnapped by members of the occult and sacrificed during one of their rituals. Ordinarily, this would mean eternal condemnation in Deadside, but Nettie convinced him to join forces with her, and he now serves as her intelligence agent, reporting directly on the happenings in Deadside that Nettie can't see. The manual also says that one of the perks of this deal is that Jaunty can travel freely between Liveside and Deadside, though we never see him in the former. He's also not much of a fighter, hence why the Shadow Man has to do all the brunt work. Let's see what he has to say.
Hello there, Michael. How's that treating you?
Jaunty, kindly refer to me as Shadow Man. Michael Leroy has no place here in Deadside.
Whatever, Mick. It's good to see you again. Seems like simply ages since I last set me eyes on your happy, smiling mug.
The feeling's mutual.
I suppose you've been away dallying with the old battle axe, giving her one with some of that righteous voodoo so she can stay forever young?
Something like that.
She's been filling your head with her fated pillow talk again, I'll bet. Doomsday in an army giddy until you're drunk with the stuff.
She did happen to mention a certain prophetic dream she's been having.
Did she now? Well, for once I think the owl witch might be right. See that bloody big black tower yonder?
How could I miss it?
Well, old Bruegel, the medieval painter blokey, was just telling me the other day that he thought it looked remarkably like a picture he once did.
Is that Peter Bruegel?
No, Seamus, his distant Irish cousin. Anyways, he was quite shocked, so he was, at the terrible mess that bloody thing's making. Appeared out of nowhere and tearing its way through the place like there's no tomorrow. Which, given what Nettie's saying, might not be too far from the truth.
Any idea what's going on in there?
Nope, and I shan't be knocking on the front door to find out neither. All I'd say is, if there's something wicked heading this way, it'll be coming from in there.
As you've likely guessed by now, this is the asylum that Jack and Legion were talking about in the game's intro. 100 years after its construction, it's finally complete. Worse yet, some of the Govai are in there, meaning that Michael will have to enter it at some point if he truly wants to take back all the Dark Souls. From this point onward, with one exception later in the game, Michael doesn't really have to interact with either Jaunty or Nettie unless the player wants him to. If you do return to chat with them, they'll give you some advice on what your next course of action should be. Their tips are largely similar, so just go to the one you like talking to more. Personally though, I didn't need to use them that much. Anyways, I've talked about all the intro stuff now, so let's get into how Shadow Man actually feels to play. Being an open world action game, movement is pretty important, and I'm glad to say that Michael Leroy controls pretty well. It's not the tightest I've ever experienced, but I never felt like I was missing jumps or falling off ledges due to input delay or some other bullshit that was out of my control. Despite being a pretty big guy, Michael can be nimble when he needs to be. He's got this nifty roll and side jump that I found pretty useful during boss fights. You can also press a button to make Michael turn 180 degrees, but I only used this once in combat during my entire playthrough. The Shadow Man's main weapon of choice is his personal handgun. While it's an ordinary pistol in the world of the living, it becomes something far more powerful in Deadside. The Shadow Gun. Instead of using bullets, it channels the power of the Mask of Shadows to fire bolts of energy. You can hold the fire button down to charge a more powerful shot. I also found it useful as a makeshift torch in dark areas. You get to play around with other weapons as the game goes on, but I'll talk about them later. Pinky promise. One of the most interesting features in this game is the ability to switch between a first and third person perspective at the press of a button, with both of them having their own advantages. In third person, the Shadow Gun automatically locks onto enemies when you point in their general direction, so you'll very rarely miss a shot. In first person, the gun doesn't lock on, but you'll be able to target the specific enemies you want. At the beginning of my playthrough, I switched between both perspectives pretty frequently, but as I played more, I leaned more heavily on third person because I just found the lock-on too useful to pass up. The only times I went into first person during the latter half of my playthrough were when I had to make a super specific shot, or when swimming, since the first person underwater controls make more sense to my brain. Michael soon makes his way to this location called the Prophecy Chamber, with a book placed on a table. It was written by a man named Maxim St. James, the previous Shadow Man. It begins with a personal note written for his successor. In this note, Maxim talks about his greatest achievement, the construction of a series of dead-side tunnels known as the Paths of Shadow. These tunnels enable Shadow Men to traverse the underworld with relatively little hindrance. To prevent them from being used for evil, Maxim sealed them up with coffins that must be charged with energy from Dark Souls. Unfortunately, he only got around to constructing them near the end of his time with the Mask of Shadows, so the seals closer to this part of Deadside are weaker than the ones farther out. In terms of gameplay, what this means is that the player has to find more Dark Souls to progress deeper into Deadside. Conveniently, there's a Govai containing a Dark Soul in this exact room, which increases Michael's shadow level to 1. It's worth noting that the amount of Dark Souls required to up your shadow level increases exponentially, so while it only takes 1 Dark Soul to go from level 0 to 1, it takes 25 to go from level 9 to 10, the maximum in the game. Following this note is a transcription of the dark prophecy Nettie was raving about at the start of the game. Maxim even made it kind of fun for us. Rather than have a bland wall of text, he put it on these illustrated cards. Thanks, man. Before the Shadow Men protected the world, creatures powered by Dark Souls ravaged both Liveside and Deadside. They were led by the one who is many, he who bears the mouth of blood. You know him. You love him. It's Legion. After a long, bloody battle, Legion and his army were defeated. The Dark Souls of his army were ripped out and sealed inside Govai, and Legion himself was banished to a place beyond Liveside and Deadside. The Govai were placed under the protection of the Sisters of Blood, women with powerful magical abilities. One day, against all odds, Legion returned from his forever exile. He united the evildoers of the world and instructed them to build a massive complex called Asylum in Deadside. Upon its completion, he sent his minions to plunder Deadside for all its Govai. At the same time, he formed connections with 5 mortal men and convinced them to build gateways into Liveside. The next part of the prophecy is stuff we've already seen firsthand. These 5 appeared in the dreams of a sorceress announcing the impending apocalypse. In this darkest hour, the sorceress called upon the Man of Shadow to meet with a serpent at Deadside's entrance. With his help, the Shadow Man was able to discover the Paths of Shadow, becoming the first to walk along them in over 100 years. Finally, the Man of Shadow would find the Dark Souls and take their power within him. He would enter Asylum and find the 5's gateways into the land of the living. Unfortunately for him, he would fail to stop them due to the daylight sapping him of his voodoo abilities. The sorceress would exhaust all of her powers and fall into a coma, and a dark shadow would fall upon Liveside. Upon the defeat of his enemies, Legion would take the Dark Souls under his control, giving him enough power to rule over both realms as a mad god. Obviously that last part is what Mike is trying to stop, though if this truly is a prophecy from the gods, how much could he realistically do to stop it? If Michael has any doubts about this mission, he buries them for now. The next section of Maxim's book talks about all the weapons and other stuff that the Shadow Man will have to find. I'll talk about these in more detail later, but just know that this is basically a glorified shopping list, albeit an incomplete one since it doesn't include the stuff you can pick up in Liveside. The last page of the book includes what any open world game should have: a map. It's a shame that it sucks though. On the surface, it looks fine enough. It shows you how everything is connected, where all the items on the shopping list are, and what parts of Deadside are Asylum versus the Wasteland. However, there's one huge issue. Certain areas on the map are far larger and more complicated than they appear. Take the lava ducts, for example. On the map, it's this tiny rectangle, but the actual location is not only fucking enormous, but makes use of copy-paste level design, where certain areas look way too similar to others. This one location needed a goddamn map, but sadly, this is all we get. I was only able to collect everything here after I had run through the same areas so many times that I had every square foot burned into my brain. That was not fun. Okay, so I found out while editing that there actually are world maps in Shadow Man, but for some reason they're not in the actual game. You have to go to the game folder, then click this folder called bonus content, and then click on strategy guide, and in there you'll find full maps of every area in the game. I have no idea why Night Dive couldn't have just put this stuff in the actual game, but I'm just letting you all know that this is a thing you can look at if you're lost. I really wish I knew about this before playing the game, but hey, it is what it is. Now, for those of you who really care about story and gameplay spoilers, I'm about to get into them. If this game looks like something you would want to play blind, then this is the point where you click to this timestamp and hear my spoiler-free concluding thoughts. For the rest of you, let's continue. Now, here's where talking about the story can get rather difficult, because the order that events happen is entirely dependent upon where you've decided to explore up to this point in the game. And with this being an open world game, there's obviously a lot of different places to go at any given time. I assure you that I will talk about the entire story, but I'm ordering events in a way that works well for talking about this game in a video, rather than the order that I personally experienced them. You could discover all this stuff in this exact order, but if you actually play Shadow Man for yourself, you likely won't. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Eventually, Michael gets into Asylum. It's this massive, imposing complex, far more grim than anything he's seen previously. Inside are a bunch of brand new enemies. I won't go into all of them here, but I'll talk about the two that personally gave me the most trouble. Organ grinders are equipped with a chainsaw and a meat shield. They can lay on damage fast and are the most durable standard enemies in the game. When multiple organ grinders are in a room together, they become a nightmare to deal with. The deadliest enemies, however, are the surgeons. They may not be the most durable, but their guns fire bullets incredibly quickly, and if you get too close, you'll have to deal with their chainsaws. In comparison to the boring, drab look of the Wasteland, Asylum is completely unhinged. Half its walls are stained with blood, enemies are around pretty much every corner, and the creepy music just makes my skin crawl. Take a listen to some of these tracks for yourself. Those sound effects aren't from the background, by the way. They're part of the music tracks. I wouldn't say Shadow Man's music is catchy, per se, with a few exceptions, but it's good at what it sets out to do, that being to terrify me. In fact, the sound design in general is pretty good at that. I talked about the screams from the zombies, but the noises that the Brutals make upon death are almost as disturbing. Michael himself feels pretty weak in comparison to everything around him. It's pretty common for him to grunt or groan when doing something physically taxing. This is displayed best when Shadow Man attempts to open a coffin gate that he's not powerful enough to. He feels surprisingly fragile, more fragile than he really is, which is good for making sure the game is consistently scary. The horror is unfortunately hurt somewhat by the prevalence of visual bugs. It was very common for me to boot up the game and have either the sprites in the menus jittering around, or the lighting flickering near constantly. These aren't the only visual bugs. The animation during the fast travel sequences frequently stopped working, leaving Mike just standing there, awkwardly. There's nothing else in the game that instantly took me out of the experience more than shit like this. It's terrible, and I'm honestly shocked that this was allowed to slide in a remaster of a quarter-century-old game. One of my favorite parts of Asylum is the build-up to its darker secrets. Take this sequence, for example. First, you discover that its residents have been kidnapping ordinary Deadsiders and locking them in cages. Then, you find them rooting through these piles of guts and bones. Upon seeing this, I just chalked it up to being part of their brutality. Asylum is home to the worst of society, after all, so kidnapping people and cutting them to pieces does seem in character for them. The reality, however, is even worse. Here's the real reason why this is happening.
These are the armies of the damned, the accursed vessels for the dark souls.
That's right. They've been stitching the Deadsiders' bodies together to create these enormous creatures called True Forms. Worse yet, each True Form is powered by a Dark Soul, meaning that Legion has discovered a way to break the Sisters' seal. Unfortunately, the power of the True Forms isn't quite reflected in gameplay, as I honestly didn't have too many issues dealing with them, even when the game threw 2 of them out at once. Honestly, I think I could have taken 3. Eventually, Michael is able to find what he's looking for. The gateways. There's 5 of them in total, 1 for each killer that Legion recruited. One problem though. How the hell do you activate them? All I can see are the upper halves of some corpses strung up by a rope. As it turns out, Mike needs a tool called a retractor to open them up. These things can be found in special shrines across Asylum. They look kind of like those hair clips that we all messed around with when we were kids. Or maybe you actually used them for their intended purposes. I just know that I didn't. However, looking at the map, I noticed something rather unfortunate. The retractors are really spread out. Like, spread out to areas that are not currently accessible to my level 2 looking ass. The farthest retractor is located all the way in the Fogometers, which I need to be level 9 to access. How many Dark Souls do I need to get to level 9? Oh dear Lord, help me. So the hunt is on. At this point, the game has now settled into a pretty consistent loop. Shadow Man tracks down Dark Souls in all the areas he can access, opens up the coffin gates to discover new areas, and then continues hunting in those new areas. To my pleasant surprise, each area can vary wildly in terms of aesthetics. In the Wasteland, there are the Temples of Fire, Prophecy, Blood, and Life. These areas are the least scary in the entire game. They focus more on challenging the player's skills and knowledge of their inventory. The music here makes me feel like I'm being judged on my performance by the gods themselves. These were constructed by the Sisters of Blood, and with the exception of the Temple of Life, you can still find the sisters in there. Michael can't talk to them though. They attack him whenever he starts taking their shit. One on her own isn't much of a threat, but they have a tendency to gang up together, and that can be pretty tough to deal with. Within Asylum, there are the cageways, the playrooms, the lava ducts, and the fogometers. Each location has a specific gimmick that makes them unique. My favorite was the fogometers, which has large parts of the area shrouded in smoke, forcing me to rely on audio cues to know what threats were ahead of me. Whenever Mike enters a new area, he gives a short stump speech illustrating how he feels about it. Usually it's pretty negative.
What further horrors shall I find within this terrible place? We're in a time before these catastrophic events. I would have willingly accepted pallid imitations of such horrors. I now have come so far, my sensibilities lie benumbed by all I see.
But for all his talk of how scary Deadside is, Michael never actually seems that scared himself, until he finally stumbles across something that causes his skin to turn white. Remember when I named the different parts of Asylum? Well, you may have noticed that I left one out on the map. That area is the engine room, which you can travel to at any time through the cageways, and upon getting there, this happens.
Luke, is that you, bro?
This way, Mikey.
Luke!
Come on, Slowpoke.
Scattered around the floor are childlike drawings and toys. Is this really Luke? Pressing on a bit further, another cutscene occurs.
Help me, Mikey.
Luke!
You gotta help me, Mikey. They're gonna hurt me.
It's okay, Luke. I'm here now. Stay there. I'm coming to get you.
I'm real scared, Mikey. You gotta help me. Please.
Luke, come back. Luke!
Not only does Luke seem utterly terrified, but his appearance is sickly. His body is covered in bruises and there's blood around his mouth. Mike tries to find a way to the other side of the room, but these pistons block the way, making Luke's location inaccessible. If you take Michael back to Nettie and Jaunty, you'll get some pretty interesting dialogue. Nettie's response is to immediately dismiss this as a trick from Legion.
Nettie, Luke's in the asylum. He was calling out to me. Nettie, he needs me to help him.
Hold on there, Mike. You can't be sure of anything you see or hear in that place. Try and stay focused on what you gotta do.
But he's my kid brother, Nettie.
Luke's dead. Try and get that through your stupid numbskull head. The evil's using you, can't you see that? Trying to weaken your resolve. Just get the Dark Souls and stop screwing around.
However, Jaunty voices disagreement with her, which up to this point has never happened. He says that Deadside is a place with many surprises, so if something catches Michael's eye, then that thing is likely worth pursuing.
Luke was in the asylum, Jaunty. He was calling out for me. I don't know, but maybe I was just imagining it.
You know, as the bird said, there are more things in heaven and Deadside than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Shakespeare said that?
Well, not exactly, but near enough.
I need to find out whether Luke's in there and why.
You do that, Michael. I wish I could help, honest I do, but, well, you know how it is.
Since there's no further progress that can be made, Michael is forced to return to hunting for Dark Souls until he finds a solution, leaving the question of whether Luke is truly conscious down here to hang over his head. At this point, you probably think that this game is a collectathon of sorts, similar to Super Mario Odyssey but with a horror aesthetic. However, that's not the case. In Odyssey, you're able to grab every Power Moon right out of the gate with Mario's default abilities. The only thing keeping you from doing so is your own skill as a player, so if you want them, you gotta get good. In Shadow Man, you'll often come across Govai that are way out of reach. Take this one near Jaunty's hideout. It's up on this very high ledge with no obvious way to reach it, and there's no alternative way up. So how do you grab it? Well, you need to find an upgrade. I described Shadow Man as an open world game earlier in this video, but more specifically, it's a Metroidvania. I'm sure that most of you are scratching your heads by this point and wondering, what the hell is a Metroidvania? Unless you came here for my After Death video, which in that case you already know what I'm talking about. Also, hi, you're an OG. Metroidvanias are a type of open world game in which the entire map isn't accessible right away. instead requiring you to collect upgrades to progress to new areas. Take this part of the original Metroid for example. Starting at the spawn point, if you travel to the right, there's a gap that you can't quite fit in, forcing you to turn back. If you go to the left, you can find this item called the Morph Ball, which gives you the ability to pass through. This exact same structure is present in all Metroidvanias, including Shadow Man. Remember when I was talking about that shopping list earlier? Let's finally see what we're buying. Items in Shadow Man fall into two different categories: tools and gads. Tools are items that Michael carries in his hands. Once obtained, they can be freely selected at any time either from a scroll wheel or a menu. The vast majority of them are some type of weapon, but most of them also have secondary purposes that I'll be sure to cover as well. The most common tools are voodoo weapons, which take from Shadow Man's magic meter upon use. At the start of the game, it's utterly pitiful, but as Michael increases his shadow level, the size of the meter increases along with it. The first of these is the Asan, a magical rattle that produces long-range fireballs that home in on enemies. The weapon is best used to preempt sticky situations, like killing a bunch of enemies while they're far away so they don't swarm you all at once. Unfortunately, I'm not that smart, so by the time I decided to use it, the enemies were already right next to me. Then there's the Marteau, which is similar but deals more damage at the cost of more magic. It can also be used to hit these drums, revealing new areas for you to explore. The Tête d'Amour is a magical skull that fires these purple homing projectiles, similar to the true forms though not as large. Not gonna lie, I really did not care for this one. The shots never did enough damage to enemies to justify using it over the Asan. And at the beginning of the game, when I got it, I had very little magic and would burn through my entire meter in no time at all. So yeah, not my favorite. The Flambeau is a torch that launches fireballs in an arc. It consumes an entire bar from the magic meter and takes a while to recharge in between uses, but it does more damage in one shot than pretty much anything else in the entire game. However, it has other purposes beyond that. If you use it on these tapestries, they burn up, giving access to the goodies behind them. You can also just hold it up as if it's a regular torch. Though every second it's out, it drains the magic meter, so doing this all the time isn't advised, even if the light is better than that from the charged up shadow gun. The baton is a sword that shoots flames. While it is a ranged weapon, I personally found it more useful in close quarters combat. It can also be used on these altars to warp Michael between two very far away places, which is cool, albeit not used very often. It pairs pretty well with the Enseigne, a shield that activates whenever you hold down the use button. I didn't use this as much since my playstyle is more aggressive, but it's pretty cool that there are options for the defensive as well. And now we're at our final voodoo weapon, the Calabash. I liken it to a landmine. You put it on the ground, and it blows the hell up just a few seconds later. As a weapon, it's powerful, but I had to correctly predict where the enemies are going to be a few seconds after placing it down to use it effectively, which is kind of a pain. On top of that, if you're too close to the explosion, it'll kill you instantly, making this too much of a liability for my tastes. Outside of combat, Michael can use it to destroy these marked tiles, which contain treasures and even hidden passages, so I'm happy to say I at least got some use out of it for exploration. However, not all weapons use up magic. The Violator is this super fast minigun created in Asylum that shreds through everything upon use. You'll have to pick up ammo from destructible objects, and it does slow your movement when holding the attack button down. But with firepower like this, I honestly didn't mind. Later in the game, it's revealed that a second Violator exists behind this locked case. Dual-wielding Violators makes Michael virtually unstoppable, bringing every enemy to its knees in just a couple of seconds. However, not all tools are found in Dead Side. In Live Side, Shadow Man can find the .9 SMG and the MP909. Which, much like the Violators, fire bullets at a rapid rate. The advantage of using these over the Violators is that these guns don't slow you down while you're holding the fire button. The disadvantage is that they don't contain as much ammo, and said ammo can only be found in Live Side, which is just not where most of the game is spent. The same is true for the shotguns. Now, I'm a huge shotgun guy in video games. These are typically my favorite weapons to use in pretty much any game that gives them to me, and I'm very happy to say that the shotguns in Shadow Man were pretty freaking sweet. There's nothing that I love more than hitting enemies with a powerful blast and jibbing them into a million pieces, and the shotguns here definitely scratched that itch. The final tool I'll talk about is the flashlight. This isn't a secret weapon or anything, it's just exactly what it looks like, an ordinary flashlight. I wish I could say that I got a lot of use out of it, but I kinda didn't. The shadow gun is a powerful enough light on its own, and if it's not, then I can just use the flambeau, which is not only as good of a light source as the flashlight, but it also doubles as a weapon. Sadly, however, the live side tools can't be used in Dead Side immediately after finding them, which... why? What's realistically stopping Michael from bringing this stuff with him to the world of the dead? In order to use live side tools here, you have to find the secret for it. Secrets are these things that are unlocked by... I don't know, standing in the correct place, I guess. When you find one, this enables the secret in the menu, and you can turn it on or off at any time. Typically, secrets just offer some extra visual flair, like giving Michael a giant head or replacing his model with that of another character. But there's this one secret called I like Deadside guns, which allowed me to use the live side tools in Deadside. Most of the secrets are things I really couldn't give two shits about, but if more of them were like this, I would have actually bothered to hunt them down. There are a few other tools, but they're all glorified key cards, so let's talk about the GADs. GADs are movement upgrades which open up travel through different environmental obstacles. You can tell that they're active when voodoo smoke shows up around Mike. They also show up visually on his body, even during cutscenes. There's technically 3 of them, but practically there's 4. The main 3 are found in the Temples of Fire, Prophecy, and Blood, which I've highlighted on the map. The first is the Toucher GAD, located in the Temple of Fire. This enables Mike to push heated blocks and grab onto ledges of fire. I wish I could say that I got a lot of use out of it, but there's not too many of either of these in the game, so I didn't. Shout out to the cube that led me to nothing after pushing it. Love you, boo. The second is the Walk GAD, which is found in the Temple of Prophecy. It gives Mike the ability to walk upon hot coals. This one is genuinely amazing. Touching these results in instant death, so prior to this, you had to be very careful when traveling in areas with a lot of them. The Walk GAD trivializes them altogether. And considering how many locations had them, this power opened up many new areas for me to explore, which is what an upgrade in a Metroidvania should strive to do. The third is the Swim GAD, located in the Temple of Blood. This allows Michael to swim through lava, which, much like the coals, is instant death. I feel the same way about this one as I did the Toucher GAD. It's a cool ability, but outside of the lava ducts in the Temple of Blood, there's just not that much lava in the game, so its usefulness is limited. Now let's talk about that fourth GAD, which technically isn't one. The Poignée, unlike the main GADs, is picked up along the paths of shadow. This allows Mike to climb up waterfalls. Unlike the Toucher and Swim GADs, there's actually a fair amount of these scattered throughout the game, and they can lead to really expansive areas, so it's actually pretty damn useful. However, if I can be a little nitpicky, Michael's climbing speed is way too slow, so I never use the Poignée if I can avoid it. Remember the Temple of Life? If you do, you're probably thinking, if it doesn't contain a GAD, then what does it contain? When I got here, its purpose wasn't immediately obvious to me. However, making my way deeper into the temple, I found this.
What in the name of... Holy shit.
This is Yor, an optional boss that's taken over the temple from the sisters. Depending on whether or not you found the Walk GAD by this point, this fight is either brutally difficult or a total joke, since the biggest threat are the instant kill calls scattered around the area. Upon defeating Yort, a large passage opens up, leading to this room with 5 altars. These are called the Loa. If you offer them 100 Kadu, you can increase Michael's maximum health by 1 point. Kadu are these tiny pots that can be found all over the place, really. This game is just stuffed to the brim with them. There are 666 of them total, so you'll be able to find the 500 required to maximize your health no problem. There is a reward for collecting all of them, but I'll tell you right now that I just couldn't be bothered. I simply don't find collecting them to be nearly as satisfying as capturing Dark Souls. There's way too many of them, they're hidden in locations that are super easy to miss, and the unceremonious way they're picked up doesn't give me any satisfaction. After traveling to one of the 5's live side hideouts, which we will talk about soon, don't you worry, Mike tells Nettie that he'll need his Shadow Man powers if he wants to defeat them, as the 5 use dark magic to increase their power. He suggests waiting until nighttime, but she informs him that with the Dark Prophecy so close to being completed, he really needs to deal with them now. Nettie's idea is to have Mike find 3 pieces of a device called L'Eclipser, all of which are located along the paths of shadow. In fact, by this point, you'll likely have found at least one of the pieces already. When Nettie performs a ritual with the device, it brings about a solar eclipse onto Earth, and gives Mike his shadow powers and live side. Sadly, the physical stress of the ritual causes Nettie to fall into a deep coma afterward, leaving Michael down 1 guide. More disturbingly, this has brought the Dark Prophecy closer to its conclusion, as it foretold of both the eclipse and Nettie going out of commission. Michael recognizes this and talks to Jonty about it, but he reassures Mike that Nettie is a competent individual, and that Mike should have more confidence in his ability to complete the mission. It's a very heartfelt cutscene, one of my favorites in the game.
All right. But it seems to me that somehow I'm responsible for everything that's happening. Maybe I should just get out now before it's too late.
I never saw you as a giver up, Michael. And even if we are in a situation of damned if we do and damned if we don't, it's always better to go out fighting. Get as many of them Dark Souls as you can, build up your shadow powers till you're positively bursting with them, and then go and kick the arse of whatever's behind this. I really can't give you any more advice than that.
So with all that out of the way, let's finally take on the 5. I'm going to talk about them in the order that I fought them, but keep in mind that you can take them on in any order you want. Let's get on to killer number 1, Avery Marks. So before I talk about the experience of fighting Avery Marks, I want to go over his case file real quick because it does contain some interesting things about his backstory. Plus, I said I would talk about the case files at the beginning of this video, and I'm not one to break promises. Avery Marks was born in New York City in 1973. From a relatively young age, he demonstrated a variety of cognitive quirks. He was known to be very reclusive, lacking any meaningful relationships with other people aside from his mother. He holds very strong misogynistic tendencies and mother resentment, and he likely has psychosis. He was generally regarded as being low intelligence for most of his life. As a young adult, he worked as a carpenter and a bird keeper. In 1997, Avery was indicted for attacking a woman, but he disappeared after his mother paid for his bail. 1 year later, Ms. Marks would later be found dead in her own house, and Avery was the primary suspect. Over the course of the next 2 years, Avery would go on to murder 12 people around the New York City metro area. His modus operandi was that he skinned each of his victims and turned them into furniture, earning him the nickname the Home Improvement Killer. He also left the skull of a baby canary next to his, creations, we'll just call them. As of now, Avery has yet to be captured by the local police. Upon entering through the gateway, Michael finds himself in Avery Marks' lair. The serial killer takes no time at all to introduce himself.
Here's Johnny!
What the?
I bid you welcome. Enter freely and of your own will.
Don't mess with me, little man.
Little big man. Little big man.
Didn't your mama never tell you? It don't matter how big.
My mama loves me. She never loved you. My mama kisses me. My mama would never, never, ever kiss you. No, not never, ever kiss you. Come to mama now, baby. Sweet baby, come to mama. For we are many.
Real quick, just to address the elephant in the room, I found this area before I assembled the Eclipser, which is why Michael doesn't have his shadow powers here. Avery's hideout is a condemned building in New York City, and let's just say it earned that adjective. There's a dark irony that the Home Improvement Killer would live in a location so obviously unsafe, but I suppose it was done out of necessity to evade capture by the authorities. The immediately obvious aspect of this place is how dark it is. Unless you're using either the shadow gun, flambeau, or flashlight, you're gonna have a pretty tough time getting around. With that said, areas with light are often more disturbing because you'll be looking at Avery's, artwork? The case file mentioned that he liked to skin his victims and turn them into furniture, but Shadow Man finds out firsthand that it goes way further than that. Throughout the building, you can find the rest of the corpses positioned sitting in chairs, their bodies in various states of decay and covered in flies. Each corpse has a radio in its lap. It's pretty hard to make out with the default audio settings, so I had to mute the music to listen to it, and when I did, I instantly regretted it. It's audio of Avery raping a woman, and he's been listening back to it as if it were music. We already knew from the case file and the corpses that Avery is a sick freak, but hearing him do this stuff in the moment was far more disturbing than anything else in the game up to this point. I'm shocked the devs went this far. Occasionally, Michael will stumble into some innocent people who are still alive, but only technically. Avery doesn't immediately kill his victims. He slowly tortures them over longer periods of time, skinning parts of their bodies and even amputating their limbs until their minds break. There's not much we can do for these people other than putting them out of their misery. Avery will occasionally jump out at you to score some cheap shots, but if you fight back, he'll disappear into a puff of smoke. His actual location is at the top floor of the building. Considering how intense the buildup was up to this point, I honestly wasn't sure what to expect when I got there. As it turned out, the fight was easy. I just shot at him with the shadow gun and violator while running circles around him to avoid his nail guns. I like the touch that his true undead form slowly reveals itself as the fight goes on, but the same thing happens for all of the 5, so it's not unique. It's a disappointing conclusion, but overall, Avery Marks' hideout was fantastic. While looking at my footage, you probably noticed that I was quick-saving a lot during this part, and that's because I was genuinely fucking terrified. The Wasteland and Asylum can be quite unsettling when you're playing through them, but much of the horror is too out there to leave me shaking in the moment. This, on the other hand, is far more realistic, and as a result, far scarier. As the first of the 5 I fought, Avery set an insanely high standard for the other killers to live up to. Let's see how well they did at that. Marco Roberto Cruz was born in Boulder City, Nevada in 1968. He worked as a repo man for 5 years, and did DJing and car repairs on the side. At an unknown point, he attempted and failed to commit an armed robbery, and spent 7 years in jail as a result. Unfortunately for us, this is all that's really known about his life prior to becoming a serial killer. In 1996, Marco kidnapped and killed 10 people in the Mojave Desert. Each killing followed a similar pattern. Marco would run a couple off the road with his pickup truck, disable them with a cattle prod, load their bodies into the back of his truck, and tow the victim's car back to his hideout. To this day, authorities have not been able to track him down. Much like Avery, Marco makes his presence known immediately out the gate.
Hey there, brother, yo! What's happening, my man?
Where the hell?
Hey, Yank! Hey, soul brother, it's good to see you. Come a long way for the party, but hell, it's gonna be worth it. I'll see to that.
I haven't come for a party, mister.
Can't back out now. Clock's ticking and your number's coming up. And it's Mark 5, verse 9, and Echo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
You crazy son of a bitch. You got your damn party all right.
Woo! It's an end of the world sock hop, the apocalypse prom, and Marco's yard. You're on the guest list, Mikey, and little Lukey's coming too. He's got the best seat in the house with a split lip neath that big old engine. And he's screaming for his mommy, but mommy's gone down dead sideway. She can't help him and neither can you.
Damn you.
Yeah! All right! That's the spirit, Mikey! Let's rock and roll!
Compared to Avery, who is pretty unabashedly unhinged, Marco makes more of an attempt to act charismatic and confident, trying to rage bait Michael by making fun of his dead family. Marco hides out at a scrapyard in the Mojave Desert. The whole area is swarming with these demonic dogs, but fortunately they're not too difficult to deal with. Like Avery, Marco will make occasional appearances, but he's not too much trouble as he'll disappear into smoke after a couple of good shots. There's a good chunk of cool stuff to find here too. One nice touch are these car crushers that you can interact with. They're nothing fancy, but they were fun to mess with. Just don't get too close. Another thing I liked was this UFO area located behind a slightly discolored wall. I never would have expected anything like this in a game like Shadow Man, but hey, I'm not complaining. There's this old-timey inn that Mike has to walk through to get to Marco, but the killer ends up lighting the entire damn place on fire just to get Mike off his tracks. For some reason, the walk gad isn't enough to travel through here, you need the swim gad instead, which makes no sense, but whatever. Unfortunately, there were some people inside who got killed as a result of Marco's actions. Michael feels bad about their deaths, but it's worth noting that this could have been another Avery situation, with these people being torture victims. Marco is the type of guy who likes to cover up his sociopathy, so this might be him destroying evidence of his crimes. Before this point, we can find a corpse in another area of the map that's hidden far out of view from everything else, so this is plausible. Eventually, Michael corners Marco in his disco room. They have another conversation where the killer gets on Mike's nerves even more, and the two of them fight. Out of the five, Marco's fight was my personal favorite. You'll have to duck around obstacles to avoid his shotgun. I guess Legion also gave him some uppers because he can get from one point of the arena to another super quickly. In comparison to the fight with Avery, I'll take this 10 times over just because I actually had to try during it. Overall, I like Marco's hideout and fight, but there's one thing that's really missing, and that's the fear factor. Like, a lot of this stuff is cool, don't get me wrong, but none of it shook me to my core in the way that the condemned building did, and that's kinda disappointing. Milton T. Pike was born in Miami, Florida in 1952 to a military family. He enlisted into the US Army in 1971 and served in the Vietnam War as an electronic countermeasures expert. In 1973, he was dishonorably discharged after allegedly raping a female officer. Upon returning home, Pike entered the TV repair business for 6 years. In 1979, he was indicted for the shooting of his mother, but he was acquitted due to a lack of evidence. In 1980, he joined a survivalist militia group called the American Knights of the Cross. But I guess he didn't get along too well with leadership, because he would leave just a year later to form a breakaway group called the Knights of the American Heartland. His splinter group eventually became a national militia organization, but Pike himself would be expelled after killing 18 members with a rocket launcher. Was it done on purpose? Considering who this guy is, probably. Pike re-entered the TV repair business for a period of time, but in 1986, he switched career paths yet again and became a forest ranger for the Cypress National Preserve, specializing in alligator preservation. In 1991, Pike was arrested for raping and murdering a hiker on the job. However, he escaped from custody, killing 2 sheriff's deputies in the process. From 1991 to 1995, Pike went into hiding. From 1995 to 1996, Pike reappeared on the law enforcement's radar after murdering 9 women across the American Southeast. Each time he killed someone, he recorded videos of himself hunting down and slaughtering his victims. He would then send these videos to the police, where he earned his nickname, the Video Nasty Killer. As of now, Pike is still at large. Pike's hideout is an abandoned summer camp in Florida. Most areas of the park seem to be in order, other than all of the police tape and these mysterious red stains. What could those be? Unlike the last 2 killers, Pike doesn't show up immediately. The only communication he gives us are these cryptic writings all over the walls of the buildings. There's this one moment where Mike runs through a theater, and if you turn on the movie projector, you can see a still from one of the videos Pike sent to police. Outside isn't much better. This place is swarming with crocodiles. Fortunately, I had the sawed-off shotgun by this point, which makes quick work of them. Pike himself only attempted to kill me early once, and that was in this foresty area filled with mounted machine guns and bear traps. I feel like he planned for this to be just like his time in the war. Fond memories, eh? Eventually, the path forward leads deep underground, taking Michael to this absolutely beautiful cavern area, which sadly is rather complicated to navigate through. After the initial awe wore off, I was just kind of frustrated. At the very bottom of the cave, Michael finds the man he's looking for.
Hey, you! This is private property. What the hell you think you're doing, boy?
I ain't your boy.
Don't you get uppity with me. You trespassing on my property, I can call you anything I choose, boy.
I didn't see no signs, fatso.
That's cause you didn't arrive by the front door, did you?
I don't need an invitation, fat man. I've been sent here by a higher power.
I'm the only power around these parts, boy. You gonna find that out soon enough. You gonna find out what survival is all about. Just like a rerun of the Nam. It's Judgment Day for you and all your kind. This is the end, beautiful friend, for we are many.
This fight sucks. Milton Pike is similar to Avery, except the speed of his machine gun is faster and the speed of his movement is slower. I'll give Pike this and say the area you fight him in is more interesting, but that's about it. Compared to the previous hideouts, Pike's was my least favorite. I find dealing with all the crocodiles to be annoying, and the caverns are too sprawling for my tastes. I do think this area works well for Pike, since it ties into his time as a Vietnam War veteran, park ranger, and survivalist. However, Avery was scarier, and Marco had a more fun personality. On to the next killer. Jack 2 is a figure who has remained largely secretive, even compared to other members of the Five. All we know for sure about his backstory is that he was born in the United Kingdom. In 1999, Jack killed 4 women in the London Underground stations within 4 months of each other. Strangely, each of his victims have very similar names to the victims of the famous serial killer Jack the Ripper, hence his nickname, Jack 2. The corpses were not cut up carefully. They had brutal, deep slashes in various areas that demonstrated a desire to inflict lots of pain on his victims quickly, as if to relieve pent-up rage. Authorities strongly suspect that misogyny is a factor in Jack's actions. Unfortunately, police have yet to even identify Jack's real name, so catching him has been difficult. He's a real enigma. Jack 2's gateway drops Michael in a room that looks almost exactly like Jack the Ripper's hideout in the intro cutscene. On a nearby table is a 100-year-old journal written by Jack the Ripper, where he details his experiences working under Legion. After committing suicide, Jack immediately began construction of Asylum. He intended for it to be home to those misunderstood by wider society. So basically it was a place where a bunch of rapists, murderers, and other sick freaks can find like-minded company. The journal also reveals it was Jack who designed the gateways between Liveside and Deadside, which he refers to as schisms. For the Five to be able to get back to Liveside from Deadside, they would each devour a single Dark Soul and a key called a Prism. The Dark Soul would give the Five the power to project themselves through the veil between the worlds, even though their actual bodies are still in Deadside. The Prisms opened these massive structures known as Soul Gates, where Legion's army would invade Earth from. Unfortunately, if you've already beaten any of the previous members of the Five, as I did, a lot of this is information you'll already know, which diminishes its impact. According to Jack the Ripper, the engine room is the heart of Asylum. Remember those pistons blocking the way to Luke? These provide power to the entire complex. Turning them off would not only create a pathway to Luke, but shut down the Asylum altogether. Each of the 6 pistons is operated using a console like this. If one inputs the correct combination, the piston shuts off. And this is the part where I put my head in my hands and sighed. There's a bit of explaining I have to do, so bear with me. After defeating a member of the Five, Michael can find a soul gate tucked away in a dark area of their hideouts. These gates lead back to areas of the engine room that are not accessible via the main entrance, and each of these isolated areas leads to a piston. I never turned any of them off because I didn't know the combinations. I initially assumed that maxing them out was the correct action, and that did work on one of them, but only because that was coincidentally the password. After reading this, I realized I was going to have to go all the way back through each hideout and its corresponding section of the engine room just to put in the correct combination, which, as you can imagine, was not very fun. If you decide to play this game, I advise either going for Jack first to get the journal early or looking up the codes online. Just trust me, you don't want to do that much unnecessary backtracking. Alright, let's finally put down the journal and explore the area. Jack 2's hideout is the sewers of London, much like his predecessor. There's a few demon dogs here and there, but the biggest threats are the giant blades which help the water flow in a certain direction. Jack himself never even tries to attack Michael early, unlike everyone else up to this point. Make no mistake though, he is just as deranged as the rest of the Five. To get to Jack, Michael have to walk through his living quarters, where he finds a cut-open corpse on the bed that the killer has been sleeping with. One room over, there's a whole wall of corpses hung up nice and relatively tidy, like a necrophilic brothel. Eventually, Michael corners Jack 2 deep in the sewers. only to find out that this man was no cheap imitation, but rather the real deal.
You shouldn't have come here, Michael Loire.
My coming here was unavoidable. It is prophecy, my destiny.
Your destiny is to die. That is the fate of all mortal men.
But I am no longer mortal. I cannot die.
Ha! Dying is easy. I have achieved that end more than once in my existence. And now I have returned as a bloody messiah, an avatar resurrected, a divine servant for my master's great plan.
If dying is easy, then you won't mind if I blow you away, you pathetic little man.
You may try to achieve that end, Michael Loire, but I warn you, you shall not find it a simple task at all. For we are many.
So yeah, this is the real Jack the Ripper, and I've gotta say, he has a pretty excellent fight. Jack crawls along the ceiling and drops down on Michael from above. Instead of using a gun, he wields a sword. You'd think a lack of firepower would put him on uneven footing compared to the Shadow Man, but his movement capabilities even things out. That said, he still goes down like all the rest. Jack's hideout is pretty weak. Other than the reveal of this Jack being the famous serial killer from the 1800s, there wasn't much that stood out to me. I don't find the sewers to be a particularly interesting location in comparison to, say, an abandoned summer camp. On top of that, this whole place lacks personality. In each of the previous areas, there were all these little touches that tied into their killer's history, like Avery's Birds or Marco's DJ set. But with Jack, we get none of that. It's like the devs decided, yeah, we'll just put him in a sewer, fuck it. The real Jack the Ripper didn't even kill people in sewers, so I'm not quite sure why that was chosen as his base of operations anyway. Alright, one more left. Victor Karl Batrachian was born in Geneva, Switzerland to a rather wealthy family in 1961. In 1985, he graduated with a PhD in forensic psychiatry. According to those who knew him, he was a brilliant student. He spent the next 4 years of his life at the London Medical School trying to become a general practitioner, but he was expelled for reasons that remain unknown. In 1991, he forged certificates to get a green card and emigrate to the United States, going under the name Arthur Falkus. There, he opened up a medical practice in Massachusetts with Dr. Sean McRose. But after a year of working together, McRose was found dead under suspicious circumstances, and Batrachian mysteriously vanished with thousands of dollars of the practice's money. 6 months later, Batrachian set up another practice in Ohio. During his time in the state, he convinced 5 widowed patients of his to leave all of their money with him. In a strange coincidence, all 5 of them died of natural causes shortly after, and Batrachian was the one to sign their death certificates. For some reason, the police found this deeply suspicious and attempted to arrest him near the state border with Indiana. This resulted in an altercation in which Batrachian killed 2 police officers and fled the scene. He was then placed on the FBI's most wanted list. In 1995, Batrachian sent a letter to the Dallas Morning News implying he was going to commit several blood sacrifices. Over the next year and a half, police would discover 13 bodies around the Dallas metro area. All of them had one thing in common. The heads had completely exploded as a result of unnatural internal pressure. It is widely suspected that Batrachian was the man responsible. Unlike with every other criminal we've talked about, this time, the FBI actually got the drop on it. Batrachian was tried and convicted of murdering 15 people and given the death penalty. Until his execution, he was to be held in Gardell County Penitentiary. 1 week prior to the events of Shadow Man, Batrachian killed 4 guards, took 25 more as hostages, and overrode the prison security, giving the inmates full control of the complex. The penitentiary is currently surrounded by the US National Guard, but they refuse to go in. No one knows for sure what's happening inside anymore. Upon entering the jail, Michael sees what appears to be the aftermath of a massacre. Dead bodies of prison guards and inmates alike litter the floor around him. Their heads exploded. Worse yet, when Michael walks near them, some of the corpses get up and attack him. Throughout this level, they'll be Michael's biggest threat, as they'll make use of the prison's weapons to stop him getting to Batrachian, even pulling out fucking attack helicopters on multiple occasions. You can plan around this if you're thorough enough. Ordinarily, when you shoot a dead body with the shadow gun, it'll explode. However, the corpses that reanimate don't do this, so if you shoot them all, you can be certain that every remaining one will try and attack you when you backtrack to an area. The main gimmick of this area is figuring out how to open all of the locked doors. Of all the locations, I can't really call this a hideout since it's not hidden, this feels the most maze-like. Strangely enough though, I didn't mind that. What made this different from, say, Pike's hideout is the constant action. The only enemies at the summer camp were these crocodiles, and they're not very engaging to defeat. You simply stand at the edge of the water and fire at them until they turn over. The undead, however, can't be cheesed like this, so I actually need to try dealing with them. I don't mind a maze as long as I have stuff to do in it. Like all the others, Batrachian is found far from the starting point. He's taken the electric chair as his throne. Funny, considering how he was meant to die by it.
Good afternoon. May I help you? What I meant to say was, is there something I can do for you?
Yeah, there's something you can do for me.
And what is that, pray tell?
You can get the hell out of my way.
I'm afraid that won't be possible.
Hey, anything's possible, Doc. You, above all people, should know that. I'm sorry, did I call you people? My mistake. You aren't a person at all, are you? Are you?
Don't tell me you're expecting some kind of answer to your rhetorical question.
Oh yeah, I know all about you, Doc. You think you're so smart. Look at you, so smug in your self-belief, the hero at the heart of your own pathetic power fantasy. But really, you're a little baby girl, aren't you? Deep inside, shivering inside, pissing your frilly little panties.
Oh, come now.
A squealing, puking, hairless puppy inside.
Now you're mixing metaphors.
So move out of my way, puppy dog. I won't ask you again.
I will not move out of your way. I will not. Do you know who I am? Do you?
You're a little puppy dog.
Don't call me that. I am Dr. Death. I am the Lizard King. Can't you see what I've accomplished here? I have brought his kingdom to Earth. I am the leader of the Five. You should fear me. Fear me.
I pity you.
That wasn't very nice, now was it? For I shall sit at the right hand of the Lord. Did you know that? For we are many. Were you aware of that? You ant, you piece of excrement, you nothing. And now, apocalypse. The end of all things. Your voodoo harlot was correct, Michael dear. The end is nigh. And it's sooner than you think.
First off, let's get the obvious out of the way. The action in this cutscene is absolutely atrocious. Michael somehow missing this guy at point-blank range multiple times despite hitting people way further away than that in-game is totally unbelievable. And Batrachian's punch at the end doesn't even connect nor play the necessary sound effect. Yet Mike is still sent sprawling across the floor. I'm not even sure why they decided to end the cutscene this way, since Mike is immediately back on his feet after it ends. I would also like to draw attention to this particular line.
Can't you see what I've accomplished here? I have brought his kingdom to Earth.
This says a lot about Legion's end goal, or at the very least, Batrachian's interpretation of it. This prison, full of walking corpses loyal only to their dear master, is a microcosm of what Liveside will become if their plans are put in place. At this point, we already have reason enough to stop Legion in the Five considering the harm they've brought to innocent people in both Liveside and Deadside. But this goes to show the depravity of their ideology, that they would consider something like this to be any sort of utopia. I'm sad to say that Batrachian's fight is another shitty one. I guess this game just isn't that good with bosses. Much like Jack, he uses a melee weapon rather than a gun, but his patterns are nearly as satisfying to learn. Not that I had to. This fight is mindless. He moves so fast that there's no way to dodge his attacks consistently, so my strategy was to damage him faster than he could do the same to me, which never makes for a satisfying battle. Piss poor ending aside, however, I'm glad to say that the Lizard King's lair was pretty fun overall. Having to fight actual people instead of animals for once was a great twist, especially since the walking corpses put up a far more significant challenge and are a lot more unsettling, which is good for a game that's trying to scare people. It doesn't quite hit the same level as Avery Marks' hideout, but honestly, I don't know if anything could, considering all that. The defeat of Batrachian leads Michael to the final piston, which he instantly shuts down, clearing the pathway to Luke. This area of the engine room also contains the final Dark Souls, maxing Michael Lawaz's shadow power at level 10. So, I know the responsible thing to do would be to go check on my younger brother, but I see a couple areas with level 10 coffin gates that hold secrets even my map doesn't know about, and I kinda want to check those out first. Let's start with the coffin gate in the Wasteland. Unlocking this gives the player the Book of Shadows. The first couple pages contain a poem congratulating the player on collecting every single Dark Soul and giving hope that a sequel may be on the horizon. The rest of the book contains well over 100 pieces of concept art pertaining to Shadow Man, which I spent a good while looking through. I've always found this stuff to be one of the most interesting parts of game development, since it allows me to ponder the alternative possibilities for how a game could have turned out. This was absolutely worth the extra effort. Second, the coffin gate and the fogometers. The map here is a little misleading. You can't enter the area with only all of the Dark Souls. You'll need to pick up all of the Kadu as well. If you do that, you'll enter this area with a big machine, and when you stand next to it, you can hear the sound of a Dark Soul. Except that can't be it. I collected all of them, right? As it turns out, I was right. When I opened up the door to the machine, I was greeted with this. I don't know if words exist in the English language to properly convey just how excited I was to see this after collecting 120 Dark Souls. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Light Soul. Upon collection, it puts Mike's shadow gun in a constant state of being charged up, so charged shots are now his regular shots. This shit was so fucking cool. With this power, enemies become a complete non-issue, as you can now tear through them with practically no effort. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold on, Derek, you said you didn't collect all the Kadu. How did you get access to this? Well, I utilized the game's console commands. For those unfamiliar with this term, console commands are text instructions that you can put into games to modify their settings. Shadow Man rather conveniently has one built into the game, which can be accessed with the press of a button. Examples of things you can do with them in this game include making Michael invulnerable to damage, supplying every weapon with infinite ammo, giving Michael every weapon in the game from the start, and, for the sake of collecting the Light Soul, giving Michael all the Kadu in the game to get past this door. Personally, I love that Shadow Man includes this feature. I'm the kind of guy who could spend literal hours messing around with stuff like this. Now, before anyone accuses me of cheating, I want to make one thing very clear. I did not touch any of the console commands until after I had defeated the final boss. You can see that I didn't have the Light Soul during the fight if you need proof. I just wanted to be upfront about the fact that I didn't obtain this one item legitimately. Okay, now that we know what's behind those final coffin gates, let's go find Luke. When Mike reaches the other side of the pistons, he finds Luke sitting on a throne in a massive, otherwise empty room.
Luke, there you are. What you doing running away like that? Luke, speak to me, kid.
Hiya, Mikey. Glad you could make it. I've been waiting for you. I was scared they were gonna catch me. That you weren't gonna come get me.
Here, Luke. You should have known I'd always be there for you, bro.
There were bad things in the dark. Badder than the boogeyman. They did stuff to me. Stuff I don't want to think about.
Oh, God. I'm sorry, Luke.
Hey, you want to hear a joke, Mikey?
Sure.
Once upon a time, there was a murderer and his victim walking hand in hand towards some deep, dark woods. The victim squeezes the murderer's hand real tight. He says, looking up pleadingly with big brown eyes, "I'm really scared, mister, of the deep, dark woods."
Luke, what the hell?
He sighs and he says, "You're scared. How the hell do you think I feel?
I'm gonna be walking back through them on my own." Pretty funny, hey, Mikey. Pretty goddamn amusing, don't you think?
You ain't Luke. You ain't my brother.
Congratulations! You win the booby prize. It was never your brother. Just a little insurance to get you here. Really, Michael, you must learn to let the dead rest in peace.
Who are you?
And he asked him, "What is thy name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many."
I guess Nettie was right. It wasn't the real Luke after all. I suppose this is why Luke's mouth was covered in blood. Later in this cutscene, Legion shows that he can transform into people without that feature carrying over, so I like to think he added that touch just to fuck with Mike. However, there's a more important revelation to be had here.
To hell with this obscure shit. I don't need it. All I need to know is that I'm gonna take you down.
Really don't get it, do you? You're even more of a posturing fool than I first believed. When I came up with my grand and incredibly brilliant plan, which you will know as the prophecy, all those years ago.
What? You created the prophecy?
Of course I did, Pillock. Surely you didn't believe all that bollocks about the old gods imparting the knowledge to the ancients. The only god back then was me. It was I who spoke to the ancients in their dreams and planted the seed for my triumphant return. Of course, all those years ago I couldn't have hoped for a more willing puppet. Luckily, the puppet is you, Michael Leroy. And of course, now that you have so kindly presented poor Lukey with his teddy bear, it is impossible for you to leave.
You bastard!
Thank you. I suppose you've read Les Cartes, for it is written, and Legion took the power of the Dark Souls unto him. I knew that the Dark Souls would be difficult to get, and I needed someone to bring them to me. And here you are, replete with their immortal power. A power I require to energize my Dark Engine and project my armies across the Veil to Liveside. As it was in the beginning, is now, and forever shall be.
It isn't over yet.
See, Batrachian? That's how you do action in a cutscene. In all seriousness, it turns out that the Dark Prophecy was a load of shit, merely designed to convince Shadow Man to collect all the Dark Souls and bring them here. The 5 were merely pawns in Legion's game. Whether or not they defeated Michael was largely irrelevant for the success of the plan. You may think this is bad news, Michael and his associates having fallen for a grand trick. However, I don't quite look at it that way. If it's true that the gods never forecasted these events themselves, then the prophecy isn't something destined to be completed. And if it's not destined to be completed, then Michael still has a chance. The first phase of Legion's fight is pathetically easy. It's similar to the Batrachian fight, but Legion isn't nearly so difficult to dodge. I literally finished it in under 20 seconds. However, this demon won't go down so easily, transforming into a far larger and more powerful beast. He's effectively a flying true form, firing out purple projectiles and physically striking you when you get too close. But as you all know, I never had much of a problem taking the true forms down either. Even if I did, the area is littered with destructible barrels that give away all the life, magic, and ammo that you could need. Legion goes down, just like the rest of them. In a dark yet satisfying twist, Mike decides to fulfill Legion's prophecy after all, in the most literal way possible. He directly transfers the Dark Souls to Legion's body, knowing that the exhausted demon won't be able to handle such a surge of powerful energy. As Legion lay dying on the floor, Asylum begins to collapse around them. Michael makes his escape as Jaunty eagerly awaits a celebratory drink for a mission accomplished.
My God, the lad's got him bloody done it. Looks like you owe me that drink, Michael.
I am the Lord of Deadside, walker between the worlds, immortal voodoo warrior. As a god, I stamp upon the writhing face of the Deadside serpent, weapon in my hand, the arcing death blow, the horror, I embrace it.
And that was Shadow Man. For the most part, I very much enjoyed this. Despite my gripes with aspects of the presentation and level design, the quality of the atmosphere, exploration, and combat more than made up for those deficiencies. The amount of weapon variety and freedom this game gave to me was very impressive. It feels like the devs fully embraced the idea of letting people play the game however they wanted, which I'm a huge fan of. Additionally, I deeply appreciate the existence of a non-linear horror game at this moment in time. Not to be too harsh towards current horror games this decade, but many of the most popular ones right now feel too railroady, with scary moments being scripted to occur at specific points. When you open up the playfield in the way this game did, scary moments feel way less predictable, and as a result, more terrifying. I totally get that not every person will be head over heels for this. Horror games and Metroidvanias in general appeal to a very specific kind of person, and I'm not entirely sure how much overlap those two audiences have with each other. But as someone who's a pretty big fan of both genres, I extend my arms out and embrace it.